Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Adam from Miller's Custom Guitars and the N+1 podcast. It's been a while. I didn't have an episode last time, so if you are still tuning in, I thank you so much for doing so. And this podcast, hey, if you're new to the podcast, thank you so much. This podcast is all about hobbies, passions, obsessions. Look, I just bring on amazing guests, and we just talk about what they find interesting. Okay. So it started with, I'm a musician. Originally I wanted to talk to guitar players, other guitar players, and talk about their guitar collection. That was my seed of an idea. And with guitar players, the idea is, how many guitars is enough guitars? Well, N+1, and the number of guitars you currently have will plus one more. And I quickly realized that if I just talk to the people I know who play guitar, I'm going to have like 7 episodes and that would be it. And eventually I had the idea that if I open it up and talk to more, fields of interest, I could have a podcast that runs a lot longer, hopefully. And so we've been talking to artists, actors, photographers. We've been talking to I talked to Courtney Pong, who runs a improv theater in Boston. I've been talking to a bunch of really interesting people. I talked to Josh Gomes, who is he's a prospector. I had Gabe Peterson, who came in and fed me scotch, and I don't drink at all, so that was very interesting. So we've had some really interesting episodes, and we've had some really interesting topics. And so that's what the show is all about, is just talking to people about what they're passionate about. And the whole show is not just what you're into, but what is next, what's on the horizon. And that's what we're about. And I am very excited to bring in today's guest. And this is Bekki Oribello from Dragon Hearth Designs. Bekki, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi. And my family, we went over I work in Jackson, which is a couple cities over. And when I was at work, everyone was talking, hey, Dandelion Days, Dandelion Days, Dandelion Days, which is like a city fair that they do every year or so. And I've been working in Jackson for 2.5 years, and I've never gone. And I just decided, hey, we're going to go. And my family, we were at Dandelion Days, and we're walking around, and there's hundreds of booths, right? There are hundreds of booths, and vendors, stalls, there's food, and there's all these artisans and craftsmen, and there's precious stones and all these things. And we're walking around all these booths, and we walk up to your booth, and we had to stop because out of all these booths that were there, and there's hundreds of booths, for some reason, your booth stood out. And we kept trying to walk away from your booth, and we kept not being able to walk away from your booth. And your booth, it's enough to catch the eye of my wife and my daughter. But it caught my eye too, because your art and your jewelry, it had a little something that the other booths didn't have. So,
well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's easy for me to say because it really was. And so we're going to get into it, but just as a groundwork for our listeners, the booth itself, and we'll talk about all the stuff that you do, but the booth, you had like, and I actually have some photos here I can go through. You had like keychains, you had art, you had earrings, you had a bunch of different stuff. And I just wasn't able to walk away. You had laser cut different things that they were, hand painted. And it had such a distinctive style to it. It was so whimsical and beautiful. And I reached and I said to you, hey, this is really special. And I'm going to be reaching out to you to talk to you potentially about being on the podcast.
Yeah.
And it's been a couple months since then, and we've had some stuff, and your family had COVID, which I'm so glad to hear you guys have gotten better.
Yes.
So I have these scripted questions, and we're going to go through them. But how would you describe, so I described what I saw, but how would you describe maybe what you do?
Okay.
To someone that, so real quick, I'm going to post the pictures that I took when I was there on our Facebook group.
Okay.
And then, but describe which, because this is also an audio medium. So do your best to describe, and then we'll get into later how you got into it.
Okay. Well, I create items, as you said, keychains, earrings, toys, novelty items, gifts, all kinds of things on a CO2 laser machine. So I have a program on my computer that I can design with, and it is directly connected, to the laser. Once I'm finished with the designing, I send it over to the machine. It does all the cutting and the engraving. Then after that, I take it out, and sometimes it requires a little bit of sanding or, finishing. And then I do the painting and putting the findings on the earring hooks and the keychain rings and things like that. I paint with mostly paint pens because they have that nice fine tip on them, and I do work with a lot of very small items. So, and I also use a lighted magnifying glass because otherwise I wouldn't be able to see anything. So I do tend to use that for all of the little fine details so that I can get real, good into the little tiny lines and things. But yeah, and then I like to package them in fun packages sometimes. And I found all these different vendor events like Dandelion Days, and that's what I sign up for and where I sell mostly. I have just started a website and I have an Instagram, but they're still really new to me as well. So yeah, but that's basically what I do. The basics of what I do. So
awesome. You use the CO2 laser, and then you use the paint pen, and you use a magnifying glass. Yeah, because some of your things are so small, but they're still painted really intricately in some of them, which is, I think, maybe what drew me to some of them is that even though they're so small, they're still they still have a lot of character.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, they're lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get into this? And this is the question I ask all of my guests, which is, what was your gateway drug? How did you get into this? I mean, at some point, Bekki was walking around and she was wearing boring jewelry. And then she was like, maybe doodling in her notebooks or something. And she's like, I need to make better doodles and we need to wear better jewelry. And I also, lasers are cool. I don't know. You tell me your story.
It wasn't quite like that, but so I've been a crafty person pretty much my whole life. I have enjoyed creating. I've enjoyed mostly for gift giving. I would make things for people and things like that. I started out with just drawing and painting when I was young, and then I used polymer clay for many years, and I did lots of earrings and little statues and things, miniatures. And then I would give these away as gifts, or I would wear them myself because I'm very colorful. I like a lot of spice, I guess, in my life. And so it was always kind of my way of showing my personality and things like that. And so I would always have these fun and goofy earrings. And then people started going, oh, well, I would like a pair of those. And I was like, well, this is okay. Maybe I'll try this, And so my husband was in the military for 20 years. And so we were stationed in all different places. But when I first started the clay, we were in Japan. And so I had a friend tell me, oh, there's a big bazaar coming up and you should join and sell your stuff. And so that was my first ever event. That was selling polymer clay items. And I did really well and it was very exciting, but it was a lot of work, work. And so I was just like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, because at the time I had very small children. And so my kids I only had 2 at the time, but they were 6 and 3 at the time. So it was like, I don't know if I could just keep putting this much time into it. So it was still kind of was just a hobby, I guess, for me. A few years later, we were stationed in Arizona, and I had a friend who was into scrapbooking, and she got me into scrapbooking. So I kind of put the clay to the side and started scrapbooking. I was actually a consultant for a company called Close to My Heart. I'm honestly not even sure if they're around anymore, but they were kind of like a Pampered Chef or a Tupperware. It's like that,
Sure.
multimedia
Right.
sales. Anyway, they I did that for 8 years, and I would create items with paper. It was a paper crafting, and I got real fancy and would do fancy cards that were like pop-up cards, and I would do
Yeah.
scrapbook pages, and it was always all about sales, all about sales.
Right.
But I didn't really like that aspect of it.
Sure.
I'm not a pushy person, and I didn't really like that part. So I started doing workshops, and I would do monthly workshops, and I would have the people purchase the supplies for the workshops ahead of time, and that made my sales for the month. And then I would teach the workshops, and I enjoyed that so much, and I did it for several years until we moved to England. And at that time, I had a new baby and the 2 other boys, and it just got a little busy, and I kind of stopped doing that for a while. But I kind of got back into it a little bit, not in sales, but just like making things, because I had so many supplies, so many. I still do. So many supplies. And so I was like, I got to do something with all this stuff, right? I spent all the money on it. And so I started making things here and there, and just kind of, again, picking it back up for gifts and things like that. But I was also, backtrack a little bit, I loved the teaching so much in the workshops that I kind of decided that I wanted to teach. So I actually went to school, got my ECE degree, became a preschool
what does that stand
teacher.
For, ECE?
Early childhood education.
Okay, great.
Yes. And I started teaching preschool. And I taught preschool, and I absolutely loved it. And I just was in my element, and I was able to use all my creativity in my classroom.
Yes, of course.
And it was amazing. And then COVID hit. And
of course. Hit it for all of us,
And my preschool closed.
Oh,
we
no.
weren't able to reopen. It was just a lot of other things that kind of played into that. It wasn't just the pandemic, but a lot of things played into that, and I was just heartbroken. I missed my kids. I missed I loved it. It was fun, and it was just during the pandemic. It's very similar to your story, actually. I was able to watch your podcast about the unschooling, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. My wife's amazing.
Ironically, she is, and ironically similar. When we came home for the pandemic, and my boys were doing the Zoom schooling, right before that, I had a meeting with my son's first grade teacher. My youngest son, his name is Rylan. He is now 10 years old. She told me that he was being disruptive in class. He was refusing to read out loud during his time. He was
sounds familiar.
Playing around and not really paying attention, and so on and so forth. Well, my first thought was he might have ADHD. I have ADHD. My oldest son has ADHD. We could probably get him tested, and let's just find out, right? Well, about a week later, we had spring break, and then we never went back to school. So
familiar.
All of that kind of went, to the side. The teacher was very adamant, as soon as we get back on track, we'll get him, an IEP started, and we'll do this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay. Well, while he was home, being an ECE, early childhood education major myself, I started noticing things, and I thought, something is not right here. And I said to my husband, I think that Rylan might be dyslexic. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. So we looked into getting him tested. We got him tested, and I was right. So I was like, you know what? That's why he wasn't reading out loud, and that's why he was being disruptive, because he wasn't able to,
Right.
And they completely overlooked that. And I was pretty disheartened, honestly, because we live in a small town. It's a small school. It's not like they're there were overcrowded classrooms or there wasn't some excuse to that. You know what I mean? Not that those are excuses, but you understand what I'm
Sure.
saying. And
Oh, I know. I'm right there with you, Bekki.
and so so I thought when I was watching your podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a similar story to mine.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what happened with us. And so when everybody else went back to school, I said, no, I'm keeping him home.
Yeah.
And because he did, when I started focusing on teaching him how he learns instead of, how the books want us to teach him,
Right.
things changed tremendously. By the end of that year, he was reading. He still mixes things up, and I know you understand that too.
Right. Of course.
And it's always going to be, but he has tools now that I've taught him that help him to cope and to manage with that. And I was able to do that because I was able to stay home with him, and I was able to, focus on solely him, which was great. Because we sat down and made this decision, hey, okay, everything is going back to normal, the new normal. Kids are going back to school. People are going back to work. What are we going to do? I said, well, I want to stay home and teach him. I want to stay home and be a homeschool mom. And my husband was like, well, okay, great. But what are we going to do for that extra income? And I was like, I don't know. I'll come up with something. And
you can only buy so many lottery tickets,
Yeah, right. So I happened to be online one day, and on Facebook, and I happened to see an ad for a Glowforge machine, which I know is like the real popular CO2 laser machine that's out in the laser community right now. Probably one of the most popular machines, at least publicly. I started watching this video and I was like, oh, I could do that. Oh, that's cool. And I started looking a little bit more into the Glowforge, and I told my husband about it, and he was like, it's kind of expensive,
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. And so the more research I did, the more I decided I did not want a Glowforge, but I was piqued. My interest was piqued.
Yeah.
I was like, this CO2 thing is kind of cool, though. So I really started kind of digging into it. I spent about 3 months doing research. I made a proposal to my husband. Hey, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to do it. And he went, go for it. So, I guess I convinced him just enough.
You showed up. You showed up with folders and a business suit, and you said you had a PowerPoint.
Right.
Hey, here's your proposal, and I present to you with these.
It wasn't exactly like that, but pretty much. And so I ended up buying a full spectrum laser Muse 3D machine. It has a 45 watt CO2 tube in it. It's a wonderful machine. It's big. It's beautiful. I am going to be completely honest with you and say I do not recommend to our viewers to go with full spectrum laser.
Why is that?
I'll try to make it very short. They're going through a lot of hardships right now. They had an employee who was embezzling money, and
no good. So full spectrum is the brand?
Yes.
Okay.
And it caused a lot of issues, and unfortunately it was not handled properly, and so there's a lot of bitterness right now with the company. So if you're looking into buying a CO2 laser, maybe stay away from full spectrum for now. I'm hoping they'll get their act together, but because I love
you've had good success with yours, but maybe hold off for a little bit until the business
just a little bit
settles a little bit.
Right.
Okay. You got this machine. Can I ask what you spent on it, or is that trade secret?
I got the
Here's the deal. I'm a gear nerd, right? I'm a guitar player, right? So guitar gear is like what I live for. Like that's what the whole show is, right? Like the gear, right? All my guitars. So tell me about the gear. I want to know.
So the Muse 3D has the reason it's called a Muse 3D is because it has a 3D camera in it. So
Okay.
I'm able to capture the workspace within the machine, and it allows me to basically fine tune where I would like to place the items that I'm trying to cut on the wood that I'm
Mm,
using. I can actually show you a piece right here.
okay.
I use wood like this. It's 12 by 19
How
plywood.
thick?
This one here is a piece of cherry. I have
Oh yeah.
cherry, I have walnut, I have maple,
Nice.
I have birch,
What's
and
the
I have
maximum
oak.
thickness it can cut through?
This machine particular, it can cut through 1/4 inch. There are more
Okay.
powerful machines that can cut through half
Sure.
inch.
Oh
I
wow.
generally stick with the
Dang.
1/8 inch. That's what this is here.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, Nice and lightweight, and I like it. And the machine just cuts it a lot smoother. When I'm using 1/4 inch, I have to use higher power, and it tends to have some char, and so I have a lot more cleanup. But I mean,
Mm.
I do use it occasionally when I need to. Machine also, I purchased the full package, so I got the
Yeah.
riser, which lifts the machine up and gives me extra space underneath it, so that I can engrave on bigger items. Like I could engrave on a baseball or even a bowling ball if I wanted to, or I could
Wow.
engrave on a chunk of wood, or you know a piece of slate or a rock or something along those lines. That's a
That's
bigger
awesome.
item. Yes. So I
That's
needed that.
cool,
I
man.
wanted that riser for that reason. It also has a pass through window on the riser for people who want to make big signs. I'm not really
Sure.
into that. As you saw, my stuff is more
Yeah.
small and detailed, but it is
Yeah.
that's an option.
Hmm.
It also I also purchased, well, in the bulk package that I got, the rotary came with it, so I can do tumblers,
You could do bottles and stuff, like water bottles if
bottles.
you wanted.
There's one that I did
Yeah.
recently. Ooh, it's kind of hard to see.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
just so stuff like that, and then and then it came with a cool box is what they call it, and it basically has an air compressor in it to keep the air assist. That helps the flames to stay low. That way things aren't burning, because it's a laser. So
You're using a laser to cut wood, so things have a
yes,
chance to catch on fire.
yes, they do. And the cool box also provides the water that goes through the CO2 tube, and it keeps it cool.
Mm.
If you don't have that, it won't run, because
Okay, wow.
it's so powerful that it would shatter the glass without the
Wow.
water. So you have to make sure that stays full and cool. And yeah, so that whole package was $8,000.
Whoa. Holy moly.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Cool.
And they, I mean, you can go lower, a little bit lower, but they can also go much higher too. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
yeah, and I can tell from your stand, you're definitely cranking out the materials. So that's for sure.
Trying
Especially if
to.
you, yeah. The thing is if you have the vision for it, which obviously you do. I'm looking at your pictures. Like you can. It's just a tool,
Hmm.
right? So you can
Right.
use it for manufacturing.
Hmm.
For me, I don't have the vision for it. I'm like, I look at the thing. I'm like, oh, that's cool, but I don't have the vision for it, right? So
Right.
for me, it's just like, oh, cool tool. But you look at it and you see the possibilities. You're like, oh, with
Yeah.
that, I can do blank, blank, blank. I can do this. I can do this.
Exactly.
And you
Yeah.
just see all these possibilities of the things you
Right.
can make. And then I walk by your table and it literally has given birth to all of this art. It freed you up to make all this art. Like, yeah,
It really
it's
did.
it's it's re- it's revenue, sure,
Yes.
but it has freed you up to make this art that was inside of you already. That
Yeah.
is so cool. I,
Thank
I
you.
do have a
I love
question, a
it.
couple follow-up questions from some of the
Yeah.
stuff you said, and just a little bit of background from me, which is that my wife and I, oh geez, how old is that Zeke? Or how old is Ezra? Ezra's just turned 10. So this would
Okay.
have been maybe 11 years ago, because we stopped when we found out we were pregnant. So yeah, maybe 11 years ago. Desiree and I, we had our own like salsa business that we did at farmers markets and stuff.
Yeah.
So like the selling at vendors fairs and stuff, like we have some experience with like that kind of thing. That whole vibe, which I love. That vibe. There's like this community vibe, and
For sure.
It's just its own jam. It's just lovely.
It is.
But I do have a question. When you that first one that you went to, you said it was in Japan, right? And you had a friend that said you should sell, and you said, okay, I'm going to go. And you were making. You said they were clay or something like that.
Polymer clay items.
Yeah, and you decided, okay, I am going to sell. Two quick questions: how much? How before you? When you decided to go and it was in the time that it was, how much time did you know before, like how much of a time frame was there before when you decided to go and the event was going to happen?
I think it was about 2 months that I had.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how much product did you bring to that with 2 months of notice?
I have that you were making by hand somewhere. Not as much as I have now, for sure.
Right.
I think I probably had about 15 pairs of earrings. I think I had 4 or 5 little statues, and I had several pins. And I think that was it. I can't.
I'm just thinking these little clay things that you're making by hand with 2 months of like, I gotta do like if I make 3 a day, 2 a day, for 2 months.
And plus, dealing with the toddler and the grade schooler too.
In Japan, I mean, like with a language barrier and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, which is my background also, which is my mom. Who has passed away, unfortunately, but she had a small business. Yeah, thank you. She had a small business that she started where it was in the sewing and quilting industry. And she made these patterns, sewing and quilting patterns and then she would take them to quilt shows. And she did booths there at the quilt shows. So same thing, and I worked for her for a little bit. So like this whole vibe of going to these shows, I'm like I know what you're talking about. And like, especially with my mom, that drive to, to see, you have this vision of, something, I have this idea and, it plants a seed in you and you got to make it. And sometimes you get a piece of equipment that makes that happen. I remember my mom, would get a specific printer or whatever. It was so weird because she had, it was, I don't want to go into it, but she had these interfacing templates that would go in the pattern, but she had to buy a specific printer that would be able to print on the interfacing and not jam. And she had to get this thing serviced like every 3 months because it was so fibrous or whatever.
Yeah.
And we would print thousands and thousands and thousands of these things. And this was a super expensive printer, but it's like this thing allows us to do what we're doing. And that's kind of what you're doing,
Yeah.
That's amazing.
For sure.
This whole thing that you're doing, you're creating art, you're making jewelry, you're making other things too, keychains and some other things. Have you encountered any misconceptions or maybe misconceptions you had going into it, maybe dealing with a laser or creating jewelry for other people, or what are some misconceptions you've had that you've encountered?
I think one for sure is that people think I use a Cricut to make everything. And I just laugh and I say, no, it's not a Cricut. And then I also,
I gotta laugh because we found a Cricut at a yard sale. A Cricut could not anywhere do close to do what you're doing. Oh my goodness. No.
I think it's pretty funny when they say, oh, do you use a Cricut? I'm like, no. I don't actually, but and then I get another one that really is funny is I'll get men to come in and they'll go, you did all of this? Your husband doesn't help you? And I'm like, no, actually he doesn't. And so I get that a lot too.
It's 2023. I can't believe we still get that,
surprised.
man.
But so I get that a lot. They're just totally flabbergasted that I did all the woodworking, and then my husband doesn't help. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
what I do.
It's one of the things that you know, I've tried to be a little covert about it, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm specifically trying to on this show, expand the horizons.
Mm-hmm.
I had Meredith Coloma on, who
Yeah.
is a guitar builder out of Canada, and she's a luthier.
Mm-hmm.
And for ages, like guitar luthiery, guitar building has
Mm-hmm.
been just dudes,
Yeah.
just men. And
Yeah.
she is like revolutionizing the
Awesome.
industry. Like
Yeah.
she is blowing up. I had, like I mentioned earlier, Courtney Pong, who is
Mm-hmm.
she runs a improv comedy theater in Boston. And that is a very male dominated industry, as
Yes, for sure.
comedy and
Yeah.
improv comedy in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
Yeah.
she's Asian American, which also gets a
Awesome.
bad rap.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Well, good for
so I'm
her. Yeah.
I'm trying to I'm trying to represent the women and the minorities on my podcast.
Well, we
And
appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah.
and actually, speaking of woodworkers, I'm
Yes.
actually I've tried to get I'm trying to get found a there's a woodworker on TikTok who's agreed to come on the show, and we're just working on dates, but
Okay.
a female woodworker
Nice.
out of Chicago, so hoping to get her on the show pretty soon.
Great.
So yeah, so
That'll be cool.
anyway,
Yeah.
represent
Anyway,
women.
yeah. So yeah, and then another misconception, I suppose, is that uh, I'm not even sure. Those are the two main ones I get all the
Mhm.
time. Or they think that I resale. I guess that's a very popular
Mm.
thing, and they're like, and then somebody will mention something, and I'll say, "Oh no, I made that," or
Mhm.
something along that line, and they'll be like, "Wait, you made all of this stuff?" And I'm like, "Yes,
Yeah,
I made everything. Everything here is all made by
right.
me." And people are just flabbergasted by that too, I don't know why it's so surprising, but I guess it is. But people think that I've purchased it and now I'm reselling it, and I'm like, nope,
Hmm.
that's not what I do. So I think those are probably the biggest things. I can't really think of anything else. For the most part, I get wonderful people in that compliment
Sure.
and just really encourage me or give me suggestions, which I love. Because sometimes I don't think of everything, and so they'll be like, "Oh, you should make this," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm adding it to my list," and I do. I keep a list right with me so that I can add
Nice.
it right there, and I have actually made several items that people have suggested to me over the last year. So yeah, I love that. So
Nice.
thankfully, I don't have too many misconceptions to worry about. So
Nice. I do have a quick question.
yeah.
Uh, the actual images, are you designing those yourself? You buying those somewhere? What are you
So
doing for the actual images that you're
most
using for
of the
your cutouts?
images are purchased by small businesses or from small businesses on Etsy.
Okay.
So I am a small business myself,
Yeah.
and I like being supported by
Sure.
people. So
Yeah.
I want to support other small businesses. So I
Yeah.
have about 10 different shops on Etsy that I follow pretty regularly that I
Hmm.
purchased files from, and they're
Hmm.
all families, people with
Yeah.
families or people with you that are trying to raise money for this, that, and the other. And those are the people that I would rather support. And I
Sure.
figure I look at it this way: they've already put in the work to design it,
Hmm.
so I would rather support them and pay them than
Right.
put in that extra work
Yeah.
to design the same thing. So
Yeah.
I do have a few pieces that I've done myself. I
Hmm.
do like to. I'm not. I love to create and design, and as I mentioned before, I used to create with clay, and that was all fun
Hmm.
and good. But I'm not as, I guess, talented at
Hmm.
drawing digitally yet. I'm
Hmm.
working on that, but so it's
Yeah.
it's difficult. So that's why I like to find files, and I will purchase files and then I'll edit them, I'll add to them, I'll create other items from them and things like that. But I do have 4 or 5 things maybe now that I designed and created myself. So I'm getting there.
And I don't say that to disparage or take away, because
no, that's fine.
There's still a tons of artistry involved. And I feel like, you still have, like I've mentioned a bunch of times, there's still so much of your artistic style that comes through. Like I said, I walked by your booth and you just look around and I'm like, you have so much of your style and flair. When you look at your booth, I'm like, I know this person's artistic style, whether it's the art that you're choosing or how you're coloring, because you're hand coloring these,
Yes.
So like, yeah, you might buy a graphic, but that graphic isn't colored. You're laser cutting it onto wood. So, so it's, oh, she just bought a graphic. No, you first of all, like you said, you're supporting other artists.
Right.
You bought a graphic. You're not just downloading something off of Google, you bought a graphic, and so you're selecting, so that's artistic. You're not just, I'm just going to buy this whole entire pack and use everything. So you're filtering that down, so that's artistic. You're getting rid of the stuff you don't like, and then you're applying your own filter to it again by painting it. So there's tons of artistry there. So and then have you ever done any kind of like commissions or anything? Like someone said, I want this specific thing, can you make it for me?
Yes, several times. I just recently did a pretty good sized order for a volleyball team. Cool. One of the mamas contacted me and she said, "Hey, I've seen some of your keychains. I think they're really cool. I'd like you to make some bags for the girls. They are the Blue Dragons." And that's pretty much what she gave me. And I was like, cool, okay. And so I came up with a design and we went back and forth a few times and then finally, agreed on the design. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. And I made all these little tags for these girls and she said they were a big hit. And I was like, well, good, thank you. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, so that was fun. I also have done 2 or 3 different wedding orders. One of them was some tags for, 2 of them actually, were tags for like party favors that had the information on them. And then the most recent one I did was wine glass charms.
Sure, I've seen those.
So, and those were front and back with the couple's name and date on the front and then the guest's name on the back. So that was a lot of work, but so I've done a few and I always have my order forms there at the booth with me in case somebody does ask and says, "Hey, I want this." So, and I do a lot of custom stuff too. Like I have a custom teacher, a couple of custom teacher gifts on my Instagram that I said, "Hey, it's Teacher Appreciation Week, do this." And so I made a few things for that. And then I also do custom rubber band guns. So I like to customize, put like names on them and stuff like that. So
yeah. Okay, so moving on with our questions, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face doing this, or maybe have you had any specific like bad experiences that you're willing to talk about or share?
Well, I think the biggest challenge currently is balancing home life and laser life. Because I've gotten very busy, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Sure.
But now I have to make more time for it. So that's a bit of a challenge, but we're working on it and working it out.
It's so hard when it's called laser life. I mean, that just sounds so cool. You just want to give so much time to it, right?
Right. Yes, for sure. And honestly, I enjoy it so much that it's like my time, my me time.
Yeah,
the
sure.
boys know
I understand that.
When that door is closed, they know not to come in because they know, Mama's having her time. So that's good. And it's just, I'm thankful for that. I would say another challenge I have is the machine itself.
Yeah.
They aren't perfect and obviously require a lot of maintenance and a lot of care. And I've had to replace parts in it myself. I've had to make adjustments and alignments, and you have to clean it regularly because you're using all this wood and it accumulates dust. And I also use acrylic occasionally. I do use pre-printed acrylic from a company called Smoky Hill Laser Designs. They're out of North Carolina. Here's one. It's got pineapples on it.
I'm looking at some of your acrylic right now. Some of your acrylic is really cool. They
have some really cool stuff that I try to use incorporate in some of my designs as well, because it's just so fun and colorful, and I don't have to paint it.
I'm looking at one of your dinosaur. I'm looking at one of your dinosaur earrings. That's like acrylic dinosaur earrings that's like got dinosaurs in it. It's so cool.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
So cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So they call it pattern ply. So pattern ply acrylic and pattern ply wood. They have wood as well. But it's fun stuff to work with. They've got hundreds of patterns, and so I do. And what I like about them is they're another small business. They're just a couple with a little girl that's, I think, 3 or 4 years old, and they started doing this out of their home, and they've grown quite a bit. But at the same time, they're still a family, and I love being able to support that. So, but the biggest challenge, I mean, honestly, is the machine. I would say it's because, I'm learning so much about it. Before I did this, I knew nothing about CO2 lasers, and I have taken this machine apart, put it back together. I've replaced parts. I've done it all now. So
you could start a third career as a repair tech. Go around to all the other people that are doing this and go and fix their machines. Charge $300 an hour, and plus expenses and airplane tickets. I'm telling you, Bekki, there you go. You do that.
Yeah, but so I would say that the time and the machine are my two biggest challenges.
Yeah. You mentioned balancing the kids, the family life with the thing, and you mentioned also homeschooling.
Yes.
I mean, this is just, I don't know, we can maybe cut this or whatever. Have you ever considered maybe bringing them along or maybe having them do some with you or anything like that? Just like, because for me, like, because we talk about unschooling or whatever, and for me, like, the heart of unschooling is like, hey, why don't you come and check this out? Like, see what I'm doing, and maybe, hey, help me change the strings on this guitar, or like, look at how I'm, whatever. Have you ever done any of that?
So actually, my two youngest boys are the two that still live at home with me. My older two are grown and gone. They do a lot with me. They help me with sanding. They help me with when I do bigger projects that require spray painting. They'll help me with that. They help me put things together and actually bag things, like, for example, my little, I don't know if you can see it. My little,
pull it out a little bit. You're a little close.
There we go.
There you go. Here you go.
These are cool. The little pocket pals that I sell, and they always bag these for me. So that's one of their jobs, is they bag. And then I've had my youngest, actually, my 10-year-old. He designed with me a pair of earrings one time, and
that's cool.
He had an idea, and I said, okay, well, come help me make it then. And so he did, and we sat here and we drew it out, and he was so proud of it when we were done. And so, I sell them. They're the s'mores and fire pit earrings that I have. It's a little s'more in a little fire, and I sell them. They're on my rack, my display rack. So he's so proud of that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we do a lot of unschooling as well. My teenager, he comes to the events with me. He's my helper at all of the events. So he helps with money, and he helps with sales, and He gives me breaks when I need a break and things like that. So yeah, he's
Nice.
quite the little entrepreneur himself, I think. So yeah.
Nice. So what about this whole thing fills your bucket? So obviously you're trying to add some supplemental income,
Yes. Yeah.
but you wouldn't do it if it didn't like fill your bucket some way or another, right? If it was just the money, right? There's maybe other ways to make money, right? Why this? What fills your bucket?
I love to create. I love to try different colors on things. I love to, come up with ideas and different ways to make something or to put something together. And when I am in here and I'm working and I'm at my desk and I'm painting or I'm at the computer and I'm designing, and then I get the finished product, there's just so much fulfillment in that.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I just love that I have that gift, and I know it's a gift from God. I know that my creativity is a gift, and I love being able to use that and to make other people smile and make other people happy. And that's what fills me. That's really the biggest reason why I do it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have something that you might consider to be the Bekki Oribello Dragon Hearth Designs signature move, or maybe like a veteran move, something that like people, when they see your art, they know it's you?
I think that a lot of people recognize me by my style, like you mentioned. I have a lot of color, a lot of just fun, goofy stuff. A lot of my prior preschool days come out in my work, and you can see that.
Yeah.
And I think that has that I think that's what people associate me with now, is that just bright color, fun. I have a whole different niche of people that know me for my rubber band guns, though. So this is one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and they shoot real rubber bands. So, and I have, so it's funny because I'll have people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're the one that does, the pretty earrings," and then I'll have other people come up to me and go, "Oh, you're the one that does the cool rubber band gun." So I have two different brackets of people that know me.
They almost don't even overlap.
Right? I know. It's so funny, but yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I guess mostly I think people just are starting to recognize me for just the unique style that I have of just color and design.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you have something that you might consider as is a guilty pleasure, like something that's someone might, I don't know, judge you for or look down on you for, but you don't care, but you do it anyway?
Well, we kind of already touched on it, and I think that's file buying. A lot of people in the laser communities are like, well, if you buy the file, then you're not an artist. Well, I don't agree with garbage. That, but
yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing is I think that is probably my biggest guilty pleasure, is that I'm like, I don't really care whether you think it's art or not if I buy a file, because I'm going to buy it anyway because I think it's adorable and I want to put my spin on it. So
sure. Yeah. Like our modern culture, like gatekeeping is so prevalent, and they want to gatekeep everyone from, you can't do it this way, you got to do it that way. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're not a real Star Wars fan unless you whatever. And it's just so stupid. It's like, let people enjoy the things they want to enjoy. Let people, it's just so stupid. So that's awesome. Do it, do it your way. Cause like I mentioned, there's so much artistry involved in the stuff you're doing. It's so evident when you walk by.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you have something that you might consider to be like your favorite thing you've done, or maybe like a favorite moment, or like your best moment, like a shining, something you look back at and you're just like, man, that was so cool. That was so amazing, that thing that happened?
I think it's not just one thing really, but it kind of is all the same thing. So
Mm.
what's really exciting and just special to me is when I have people come to my booth and then they say, "Oh, this is the girl I was telling you about," to their friend or their mom or whoever. I love that
Nice.
because I'm just like, "Oh
That's
my gosh, they
awesome.
remember me," and that's just so cool to me. Or or people who come back, they'll be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I saw you at Dandelion Days, and now I'm here at this event because I loved your stuff and I wanted to bring so and so to see it." And that I just love
That's
that, and
wonderful.
that's such
Yeah.
a shining moment for me because sometimes I will get discouraged, and sometimes I think that things are not perfect or it's not enough, or maybe that color was wrong, or this whatever the case may be. I'll get down on myself about something, and then that happens and I'm like, oh man, that's just such a great encouragement for me, and I just love that. It just makes me happy. It makes me
Hmm.
proud, I guess.
Nice. Okay, so do you have any advice for beginners? Like, let's say someone is sitting there and maybe it's CO2 lasers, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just
Right.
someone, they want to get into something crafty, maybe earrings or
Mhm.
whatever. So something crafty. What advice would you give them if they are interested in um, doing something?
Give yourself some grace in the beginning.
Preach it,
It's
sister.
it's so important to understand that failures happen and that you're gonna mess up and that it's okay and that you
Yeah.
can move on from this. That's huge, I think, because so many people give up way too easily when something is not easy enough or something is more challenging than they thought it would be. I think that it's so important to stick to it and stick through those failures, and you'll come out on top.
Mm,
Another thing I want to mention is find your niche. Find something that just really speaks to you and go for it. Don't worry about what other people think. Don't worry about, the popularity, or is it something that's, going to sell or whatever. Because if you put your compassion into it, people are going to see that and they're going to want a part of it.
yeah, that's amazing. And we actually teach our kids that that failure is just a chance to learn something, and every once in a while, like, instead of, what did you do today, or what went right today, we'll sometimes at dinner
Right,
that was hey, what did you fail at today,
right,
so
right,
yeah, that's a great way to look at it, is that failure, it's, you can't learn if you don't fail, you
right,
know
right.
so, and
Absolutely.
I would also encourage people um, to just silence the voice of that imposter syndrome in
Mm-hmm.
our brains,
Yep.
because you'll have that failure, and then you'll have this voice of the imposter syndrome in your brain going, well, hey, well, you failed, you can't do this, you're not going to
Right.
be able to do this, and just do it anyway.
Yeah. That's what I
Just do
say.
it
Yep.
anyway. Just
Yep.
just keep doing it until you can do it.
Right. Right.
Like, so okay, I'm a musician, right?
Right.
Coming from a guitar, right? Um, when Jimi Hendrix picked up a guitar, okay, he's probably the greatest guitar player of all time. A lot of people say so.
Absolutely.
He's not my favorite, but a lot of people say he's the greatest guitar player of all time. All right, when he first picked up a guitar, right, and he probably failed at playing guitar for the first time. And if
Probably.
he said, "Oh, I can't play guitar. I'm never going to do this again," we would have been robbed of one of the greatest guitar players of all time,
Right.
because no one can play the guitar when they first pick up a guitar. It's
Right.
it's impossible. You
Right.
have to try. You have to move. You have to practice. You have to improve. You have to take lessons sometimes. You have to
Yep.
teach yourself sometimes. You
Right.
have to. So yeah. No one starts at 100. No one starts at Jimi Hendrix. You start
Right.
at a little kid in your living room or in your bedroom,
Right.
with your fingers hurting,
Yeah.
because it hurts to play
Yeah.
guitar. So,
Yeah.
anyway, that's great. That's great advice, Bekki.
Thank you.
It's amazing. So, I have a section. I don't know if this is going to work. Okay, I have a
Okay.
segment on my channel. Okay, on this podcast,
Hmm.
called "Let's Get Into It,"
Yes, I
where
saw that. Yeah.
and I don't know if you had any ideas.
I tried to
where
come up with something, but without being in the same room, it's kind of hard. So maybe we'll
okay,
have to do another segment, and you can come and visit my workshop.
I would love that. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. I would love that. We can't always do it. I mean,
right.
there's shows we can't do it, but maybe in the future
Yeah, I would
we'll have
love to
a
do
revisit.
something in the future because
That's amazing.
virtually it's almost impossible because it
Yeah.
just doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, yours is very tactile, but
Yeah.
that's fine. Okay, so let's get to the point of the show, Bekki, which
Okay.
is what is N+1? What is next? What's on the horizon? What are you dreaming about? What are you working for? What's
Okay.
coming down the pipeline? What is next for Bekki and Dragon Hearth Designs?
Okay. Well, ideally, I would love to do workshops again. I want to teach
Nice.
people. I want to do like a makerspace workshop. So my dream and my hope is to build. We have property here, that family property, and we're eventually going to be moving on to it, building a house and living there with the rest of the family. And my dream is to build a workshop when we move there and have a nice big space with a classroom and a maker space with my machines. I now have two actually, because I also have an X tool diode laser. So I have two machines and we have two 3D printers, and I would love to just do a maker space and teach kids and adults and just have fun helping people tap into their creativity. So that's my dream, that's my goal. That's my goal. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. If that happens, keep me posted, and maybe
I
we'll
will.
drive up and we'll attend.
All right.
Well, Bekki, thank you so much for coming on. You have been a delight. You've been an
Aw, thanks.
amazing guest.
It was fun.
Oh, thank you. It has been fun. How can people find you? Do you
Okay.
have social? I know you're on Instagram.
I
How
am,
can people
yes.
find you?
So on Instagram, I'm Dragon Hearth Designs.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty easy to find. I don't think there's any other like tags or underscores or anything like that. It's just Dragon
Sure.
Hearth Designs. I have a website. It's goimagine.com/Dragon Hearth Designs, all one word.
Okay. Great.
And right now it's pretty small, but I mostly have wedding stuff on there now because it's a lot easier for people to do custom bulk orders when it's a website.
Great.
So I mostly just have wedding stuff on there, but there's a few other things too. I also, I'm on Facebook, also Dragon Hearth Designs, same thing, pretty
Great.
easy. I don't do as much on the Facebook as I do on Instagram. I try to
Sure.
stick with Instagram. So yeah,
Nice.
and that's pretty much where you can find me, and then all over at the different events.
Awesome. We will put a link in the show notes.
Okay.
If you are watching on YouTube or if you're listening on like Spotify or Stitcher or on Apple Podcasts, you can look in the show notes and you will see a link to all of those things she just mentioned. If you want to give her a follow, that would be great. You can see her art in also on the Facebook group. I will post links to the photos that I took when I was at Dandelion Days. You can see a bunch of her art photos there. I saw, so that would be a great way to give her a follow and see some of her art. It is worth looking at. It's great. Bekki's been amazing. But before we let you go, I got the two silly things that I ask every guest.
All right.
I love these. This is the best part.
All right.
So I want you to say a sentence or two and casually drop the name of the most famous person you've ever met. And you've been all over the world, so you might have a good one.
I have. Oh my goodness. Oh man, the most famous person I've ever met.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay, so I was at I was a concert goer a lot as a teen. I followed DC Talk everywhere.
Ooh.
Yes, I was a huge DC Talk fan.
Yeah.
When Michael Tate moved over to Newsboys, I started following Newsboys, but I was a fan of Newsboys beforehand. When Peter was there, I became a much bigger fan once Michael Tate moved over to Newsboys. I happened to go to a Newsboys concert several years ago, and my oldest son and I were waiting in line, and we ended up being at the very back of the line. We were the last people to talk with Newsboys. Michael Tate and the drummer, forgive me, I cannot remember his name now, but we ended up sitting there and chatting with them for like 20 or 30 minutes because we were the
Amazing.
last ones. We took pictures with them, and Michael. So when I was a teenager, I had gone to several different shows, like I said, with DC Talk. And so I told him, I was like, hey, so do you remember going to this little town in Colorado? Because that's where I went to high school. And I said, you guys stayed with this family, and it was when you were brand new. And he was like, Paris? And I was like, yes. So Paris was our youth leader in church. And later became my cousin because he was my husband's cousin. I met my husband in youth group. And so he was like, he remembered like right away who I was talking about. And it was just the coolest thing because it was like, here is this dude amazing. That's like traveled all over the world singing these wonderful Christian songs. And he remembered who, this 20 years ago, this tiny little, town. And it was just so cool. And he was like, man, I can't, and he was just, we were talking and it was just so cool. Everything was just really cool about it. So
my first real rock concert was Audio Adrenaline opening for DC Talk at Arco.
Nice.
During Bloom when Audio Adrenaline was on Bloom.
I saw a couple of those concerts. Yeah.
to this day, that's still a top 10 concert. And I mean, I've seen Weezer, I've seen Jimmy Eat World, I saw Queen when Paul Rogers was with them.
Wow.
I mean, I've seen some monster concerts, but to this day, I mean, that was a heck of a show.
Yeah,
that was a real rock show. That was a good show.
DC Talk was probably the best year, honestly.
Yeah.
When the two of them went together and stuff.
Oh my gosh, that was a good show. And then for me, for my most famous person, it's probably David Crowder. So
I love David Crowder. Yeah, seen him a couple of times too.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last one, and we'll get you out of here, is what is, in your opinion, the all-time greatest cartoon theme song?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Come on, Bekki. It's not that tough.
Okay. For some reason, I think. Okay, well, gosh, I don't know. I'm gonna have to say DuckTales.
Woo!
Woo! Yes.
We got a lot of DuckTales.
It gets stuck in your head. You can't help it.
Yep. Life is like a hurricane.
Yeah, it sure is. You're definitely.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Well, Bekki, thank you so much. You've been delightful. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If you guys are listening to the show, we would love it if you gave us a like or a subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you share it with a friend. If you found this interesting, that's a great way to share the show, to grow the show. But other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Bekki, for coming on. And until next time, everybody, don't be a jerk.
Bye.